When we begin to reflect on the essential principles and practical applications of fundraising in congregations, not only is it important to consider the why, questions of theology and mission, and the how-to, implementing successful strategies, but it's also important to contextualize these questions in what we know about the current state of giving and trends that continue to shape our understandings of religious fundraising. While the Lake Institute on Faith and Giving focuses on theology, practice, and assisting congregations to implement cultures of generosity, one unique aspect of our work is providing churches and religious organizations with the most up-to-date and comprehensive research possible on aspects of religious giving. As a part of the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, we seek to pair on-the-ground knowledge of religious traditions with the school's up-to-date research and scholarship from across the country, to help translate statistics into practical tools and strategies for use by faith communities. But before we can get to the practical tools and strategies, it is important to have a sense of the landscape of religious giving. In this short segment, I will hope to offer a general picture of giving trends and the particular place of religious giving in the United States. I will then turn the focus on donors, what we know about donors, their expectations from organizations they support, as well as the various ways they approach their giving. And third, I will offer a few trends and best practices for congregations and their understanding and practice of stewardship and fundraising. Giving trends. First, it's important to note that charitable giving in America continues to increase. The latest data by Giving USA, produced annually by the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, and the leading resource on charitable giving, points to 2013 as the fourth consecutive year of growth. With an estimated $335 billion, current giving has returned to near pre-recession giving numbers. For those of us most interested in religious giving, it's important to note that the subsector in the U.S. that receives the largest share of charitable dollars every year is religion. In 2013, religious organizations received an estimated 31% of the total of all charitable giving. Almost a third of all giving, as measured by Giving USA, is religious giving. Giving USA defines religious giving by referring only to explicitly religious organizations. So religious giving, even as narrowly defined by Giving USA, makes up by far the largest percentage of all giving. Education is a distant second, with 16%. Human services is third, with 12%. But the picture of religious giving is not entirely rosy. There continues to be a decline in the percentage of religious giving. While most other sectors have grown or kept up with inflation, the religious sector has lagged behind in recent years and has declined drastically as a percentage of the total over the past 40 years. In 1970, almost 50% of all charitable giving was religious giving. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the percentage hovered around 38%, and today has declined to 31%. Giving to religion continues to decline. Why? There may not be any definitive answers, but the state of religious giving can serve as a barometer for a number of larger cultural issues affecting the church and donors' motivations. First, there's an increasing competition for the gifts of religious donors, particularly the huge number of parachurch agencies or nonprofit charitable organizations. The religious market has dramatically been altered by many new providers of religious goods and services that compete with the services traditionally provided by denominations, education, missions, etc. The number of nonprofit charities, or 501c3s, grew from 865,000 in 2001 to over 1.2 million in 2010, an increase of 48%. So these specialized agencies often have a focused mission, rely on fundraising, and their support is outpacing the growth of funds coming to churches. Another factor is the decline in church attendance and formal institutional membership. Much has been made in the past few years of the rise of the category of the spiritual but not religious. The spiritual but not religious make up 1 in 5 Americans today in a recent Pew survey, and 1 in 3 among those under 30 years of age. Many who fall into this category may still believe in God and pray daily and practice faith, but they do not participate in religious institutions. But participation in religious institutions is an important factor in increased religious giving. There are numerous studies, all showing that people who attend church, mosque, or synagogue weekly, or 2 to 3 times a month, are between 2 and 4 times more generous in their charitable giving than those who attend less frequently, or not at all. They give at higher levels, they volunteer more often, and those involved in religious congregations give more not only to religious causes, but also secular causes as well. But as we dig down deeper, the key seems to be not just attendance or membership, but social networks. You connect with others in the pew, in a small group, through extended conversations and deepening relationships through living life together. That becomes the programmatic key to relational giving. Connecting with others is as or more important than simply belonging, behavior, or belief. And so how to engage those attending our churches is an important question that impacts a congregation's health and its giving. On top of social networks, other research has demonstrated that it is religious practices and rituals that were even more influential in creating a religious culture of generosity. So another question for each of us to consider: what does your congregation do to engage members with one another, to ritualize and practice giving regularly? While studies show that churches that create multiple opportunities to give do better than those that don't, how might one ritualize giving for those members who consistently debit their accounts electronically or mail in a check? These become important issues for a church to consider. Other reasons can be offered as to why religious giving has decreased as a share of overall charitable giving. Generational shifts in religious practice, participation, and styles of giving. 2, church leaders' silence in talking and teaching about the faithful use of possessions, apart from the annual obligatory stewardship sermon. Or 3, the church's failure in adapting to the best fundraising practices, leaving congregations to remain dependent on outmoded, one-dimensional approaches to giving. We'll want to unpack these potential reasons for the supposed decline in religious giving, but there are a few other points we might note first when examining individuals' religious giving. Despite what we may think, the past was not always better. Congregations may have preached the biblical tithe, but few individual church members delivered. For the past 40 years, giving as a percentage of disposable income has continued to hover around 2%. This percentage does differ based on theological and denominational tradition, and Adventists have done a bit better than the national average, but the percentage has never approximated 10%. In fact, 1 out of 5 American Christians, 20%, give nothing to church, parachurch, or non-religious charities. According to sociologists Christian Smith and Michael Emerson's important 2008 book, Passing the Plate: Why American Christians Don't Give Away More Money, the mean or average Protestant household contributed around $1,800 to charity. The median Protestant household contributed only $224. So the average, the mean, is skewed by the very generous. The typical gift is much lower. Average, $1,800, but the median, most common, is $224. An important practice for church leaders is to know what percentage of their giving is tied to the top 10% of all givers. What would happen if 1 or 2 of these very generous givers was unable to sustain their annual giving? Would your congregation be able to survive? But these trends are not all meant to be discouraging. In a game-changing recent study entitled Connected to Give, researchers asked donors to label the organizations to which they gave. While it's true that congregational giving is shrinking, the majority of Americans' charitable giving, 73%, goes to organizations they see as having religious ties. The study distinguished congregations from religiously identified organizations and non-religious organizations. They tracked the percentage of donors that gave to religious causes, Christian colleges, relief and development groups like World Vision, Adventist Healthcare, and called these religious giving. The significant point to be examined further is the fact that donors continued to be motivated by religious or spiritual values. Congregations made up 41% of this religious giving, but giving to other religious charities made up another 32%. So we labeled some of the trends and unpacked the changing context of religious giving broadly. But what about donors? Religious giving is not simply focused on congregations and faith-based organizations, but we must consider how one's faith and religious practice impacts a person's giving. What do we know about donors? First, we might consider generational differences. Not surprising is the fact that the more senior generations give more to religious causes and attend church more regularly than younger generations. But not only do the generations differ on what and how they give to religious causes, but it's important to understand how they respond. The pre-war generation, the greatest generation, born before 1945. This generation has been the foundation of philanthropic generosity. The religious giving of the pre-war generation increases as they age and exceeds the growth of their income. This is also the generation with a higher level of trust in institutions and a keener sense of institutional loyalty. They trust institutions and they give because it's the right thing to do. But they also are increasingly concerned with what legacy will they leave? How will I be remembered? Pastors should be well equipped to enter into a conversation with their members around these questions. Another generation, the baby boomers. As boomers age, many of them too ask serious ontological questions like, what is the meaning and purpose of life? What does it mean to live life well? How will I be remembered? Many of these people are individuals of wealth and success. As they contemplate the end of their business careers, they wonder about the next chapter of life. Reflecting the spirit of creative independence that has made them who they are emerging as the new social entrepreneurs and venture philanthropists. So as entrepreneurial donors, they see their giving as an investment. They expect an accounting as to the difference their gift is making. Their investment is accompanied by benchmarks to measure the effectiveness of the nonprofit. They see their investment as a partnership and a creation of a longer-term relationship. They expect the program they are funding to become sustainable, so their giving may carry with it an exit strategy. For boomers who see themselves as venture philanthropists, they demand more personal attention as they see their gift to be more like a business investment than a charitable contribution. The receiving institution must be certain that the proposed program fits their mission, as in this type of partnership, there's a built-in tension between donor autonomy and the integrity of the institution. For Generation X, those born from the late 1960s to 1980, this generation is often entrepreneurial, individualistic, pragmatic. They have a different view of institutions, but they value working collaboratively and often hope their work has outcomes that benefit the greater good. And finally, the millennials. There's a lot of interest in this emerging generation and still uncertainty around its future. But let me offer 3 words that define millennials: connect, involve, give. Connect. Technology is the key to reaching prospective millennial donors. This generation cannot remember a time before the internet. Millennials prefer to access nonprofits through website, social media, e-newsletter. They seek something exact to respond to. So email or technological communication should have but one main story: compelling visuals. Also, involve. Millennials give time. They volunteer for what inspires them. So treat this audience as peers, not simply electronic communication, but in ways more typically reserved for major donors. Make a place for their voice at your leadership table. Millennial participation is driven by personal relationships and connections. 81% prefer to learn about volunteering opportunities from their peers and family members. Provide one-time as well as long-term volunteer options. Be clear as to the time commitment and duties, and explain how the volunteer task fits into the mission of the organization. By a margin of 2-to-1, millennials who volunteer are more likely to donate. And finally, give. 75% of millennials give. 15% give $500 or more. And supporting a nonprofit, 47% said they would give their time, 16% said they would give money, 37% said they would give both time and money. But as the ways they connect, millennials overwhelmingly prefer to donate through the web. 70%. Smartphones and social media are now proving to be successful in fundraising. Millennial giving is impulse-driven. 42% said that they would give to whatever inspires me at that moment. These generational stereotypes are not set in stone, but these differences are real and indicate that no organization or congregation can engage its members with a single approach. We could break donors down in countless ways, by gender, by net worth, by generation. These all make differences. But one question to ask is, do you have a picture of who is in your congregation? How do you reach out to them? Do you offer multiple or tailored ways to invest in the congregation with their time and resources? It's important to know that donors are increasingly savvy. First, they're highly selective. You have to earn their support versus taking it for granted. In 2007, we did a study that asked high net worth households to rank their motivations. In 2007, their motivations were first to give back to the community, second, to continue to support the same causes, and three, that they are feeling financially secure enough to give. When asked the same question in 2009, their motivations changed. They wanted to make a difference with their gift before feeling financially secure or giving to an organization that makes efficient use of resources. Donors of all generations and financial means are increasingly aware of wanting to make a difference with their gift. That means they have to trust the organization in which they entrust their resources. So what are donors looking for? First, they're looking for institutional performance. Donors want their legacies to be well used and address specific issues, problems, or programs. They're looking for organizational professionalism. Organizations likely to receive bequests and gifts are those that demonstrate in detail a high level of professional capacity. And they're looking for communication effectiveness. How do you communicate your vision and mission? For those of us focused on congregational giving, let me say it in a different way. Fundraising is about relationships. A donor's relationship to God, religious leadership to donors, and donors' relationship to the institution or congregation. It's about vision. How does the institution or congregation see, describe, and position itself? How does the congregation envision the future? Does it think about the future? It's about trust. How does the institution handle its fiscal affairs? How does the congregation steward the resources donors give? How does the congregation express appreciation to its donors? And it's about faith formation. How does a congregation nurture a deep faith and form disciples? Does the congregation see money and the faithful use of possessions to be a spiritual practice? I'd encourage you to spend time with these questions. How does your congregation address these issues? Remember, stewardship, fundraising, and inhabiting generosity is not simply a program or a means to an end. Rather, it's an essential part of faith formation. Helping shape a congregation's theology of money is an essential part of a pastor's ministry of faith formation. Are you proactive in shaping that congregational culture to be one of biblical generosity, or is the culture one of consumerism, wealth, and prosperity that sets the terms for your church? So, you have to have a strategy. This strategy cannot be set apart from the larger ministry. It must be more holistic, an essential part of your ministry, not segregated. Remember, stewardship is an essential part of pastoral care. You have to know your donors and members. Research is clear that those that provide multiple opportunities to give fare much better. You have to develop a theology of money and possessions that's authentic to your tradition, that's embodied by you as pastor and your key leaders. And your congregation must hear you share this theology more than simply in a sermon during the fall stewardship campaign. They may not be able to hear the message then. When else are you engaging issues of generosity and a theology of money? Churches can increase giving through more teaching on giving, through multiple means of giving, and particularly through establishing clear mechanisms for transparency and accountability. If donors are more savvy, they expect professionalism alongside a compelling vision from their churches as well. Do not be afraid to track your giving, who gives, how much, who has stopped giving. Again, information is knowledge, and stewardship is tied to spiritual formation. You miss opportunities for pastoral care if you do not know how to help your members. Finally, our research demonstrates that while economic conditions are important in measuring religious giving, the bigger issues are those within our control: communicating a biblical understanding of generosity, spiritual growth, and congregational vitality around mission and vision. These are more influential and grow in giving. At Lake Institute, we have summarized the key changes we have seen among donors and congregations through an important paradigm shift. An older paradigm preaches giving out of moral obligation. The newer paradigm we find ourselves in today is about donors and donor cultivation. The theology has shifted from one of duty and obligation to a sense of a theology of grace. No longer are we institution-centered, but we are donor-focused, donor-centered. An old paradigm talked about institutions as being the base, but institutional trust in a newer paradigm must be earned. An older paradigm talked about institutions as autonomous. Now, in a newer paradigm, donors are collaborative partners. Budgets used to be need-driven. Now we see a need for giving to be value-driven. The financial focus is not inside the walls of the church, but global, mission-oriented. Giving is not simply a contribution, it's helping to create change. Fundraising is not raising money. Fundraising is nurturing generosity. There's not simply one income source limited to a congregation, but income sources are diverse and multiple. The gift is not simply a means to an end, but the gift now becomes a means to philanthropy, loving humanity, making change. Churches used to segregate themselves from business and corporate America. Now, churches begin to embrace business principles and practices within their fundraising. Lake Institute on Faith and Giving not only helps to translate the macro trends, but we are also focused on local faith communities to help congregations create new congregational cultures of generosity. And we're not the only ones. We're glad to be a part of this curriculum, and we look forward to working with you if we can be of help as you implement these practices in your own congregation.